The Real Juggle campaign with Madison Berkeley.
I'm Claire Coe. I'm the founder of Madison Berkeley. Through recruitment, Madison Berkeley works hard to change the face of real estate, and this campaign is part of that commitment and something I'm really passionate about, as I'm also a mother of two. And with me today from Madison Berkeley, joining the discussion, is my wonderful colleague, Jack.
Thanks, Claire. I guess first thing to note is that I'm not a father, so this is all super new to me, and I'm sure I'm also going to learn a lot through this process. But we do have two people joining us who are parents, and we'd love it if you could both introduce yourselves, tell us your job title, who you work for, and then I guess, this discussion and the campaign is all about parenting in real estate. So it would be great if you could tell us how many kids you have and their ages. So, Andrew, if I could hand over to you, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So I'm Andrew Gibson. I am a managing director in Kontor. I should have really started with my kids because that's what it's all about, of which I have two. I've got Jack, who turned 4, and I have Layla as well, who is 2.
So I'm Lorna Barratt. I'm a senior asset manager at Derwent, London. I've been in the real estate world for about 12 years now, and I have 3-year-old twins, Bonnie and Seb. So I'm bringing the multiples to the mix today.
Well, as you both know, it's a juggle for sure. It's quite apt we're doing this podcast today because I had quite a sleepless night last night doing lots of night feeds. So yeah, it's a juggle for sure. Lorna, can you talk us through your experiences of returning from mat leave and what the biggest issues you face day to day as a senior woman in real estate and a mother of small children?
I initially planned on taking sort of 9 months to a year off on maternity leave. By the time it came to a year, I was excited, ready to get back to the workplace, feel like my old self again. But one of the initial struggles straight away actually was finding childcare and that availability. That was a real struggle. And we were, looking for 2 spots for the twins. And actually the waiting list meant that I couldn't actually return to work for, another 3 months. So I was 15 months in the end out of the workplace, which you don't know what it's going to be like returning to work, what normal life's going to entail. But that added an element of, nervousness. But I suppose what was lovely about it is Derwent then provided me with a return to work coach, which I think was really great. It was someone out of the workplace to discuss those kind of worries and, how best to approach coming back to work. And as soon as you're back, you get into a rhythm and you kind of transition in. But I think finding the childcare and working out what that new routine is going to be was probably my main worry.
And Andrew, I guess similar question for yourself with kids, of course. How much time do you take out for paternity leave? How did you feel returning? Anything sort of slightly different from that to Lorna's or sort of similar feelings and thoughts?
It's probably very different because both Jack and Layla were born in COVID. They were both born in some form of a lockdown or other. Jack was May 20, so we were really deep in kind of first lockdown. So it's a bit of a funny one, I suppose. If you had to choose a time in your life when you had to be locked at home, it would have been then for me. The only juxtaposition to that was we were 8 months post-launch of Hedge Real Estate. So it was a very difficult time as well as a wonderful time, sort of looking back at it. I was spending hours in a Zoom room post the birth. I know I did give myself a couple of weeks out, 3 actually, and I did have time away from the computer as much as I possibly could to obviously be there and support. And then, as you can imagine, it was sort of back to the Zoom room, doing what we were doing at the time, which was really selling office space into a vortex, it's probably fair to say. And as you can imagine, in mental terms, that wasn't ideal. It was a real struggle for us at the time. But what was wonderful was coming out of that room and being able to have a wrestle with my first child. So yeah, it was a bit of a funny one because I really didn't have a defined period when I was out of the office because we were all locked at home. So that was really positive. But then the negative was that it was a difficult period. I suppose actually the birth of Jack really helped me through that period.
Out of curiosity, did that make things much more difficult for you when you then went back into the office more often, having sort of had that bond and that time together, just you with the kids? Was that more difficult or?
It was a real phasing, I suppose it's fair to say, because there were, lockdown was relaxed and then, of course, you could go back to the office. There was a period where you were permitted to go to the office if you had to, or there was a really good reason to do so. And of course, we have plenty of good reasons working in real estate and obviously having to actually tour and inspect buildings. So in one way, that was a nice reason for me to get out of the house. But at the same time, I was around the house a lot longer than I would have been had Jack been born in normal times. Because I think it's fair to say I would have had that 3-week paternity, and then it really would have been straight back to the office for me. But that was something I was in control of as a business owner. Well, I say I was in control of it. We were in lockdown, which was definitely out of my control. But, our policy at Hedge was flexible for anyone who was going to be having children, and I think I was the only one. We were certainly doing as much as we could to accommodate new parents, I suppose, fair to say.
A few years on, how does your days, your weeks look like now, Andrew, working around your children, balancing the business, balancing seeing the children? It's probably very different.
Balancing is the right word for it. I think it's fair to say I often refer to it as the juggle. I'm sure all of the parents refer to it similarly. I'm really lucky. My wife, Jo, has a great work-life balance. She works for Investec. She works 4 days, 2 of which are in the office and 2 of which are at home. And then she has Friday with the kids. So our kids are in nursery 4 days a week. But what's nice is that of those 4 days, we only have to share the drop off and pick up on 2 days because Jo can take the majority. It doesn't always work like that. And it does change week to week. But she takes the pain out of it for me, which is brilliant. On those days where there's a drop required, I do feel the pressure. Just what I'm sure everyone has been through. It's not different for any other parent. Maybe I'm wrong. Getting kids out of houses at 7:50 or whatever time it is a tricky thing. It's a case of getting them out, getting them dropped, getting to that train and getting to the office or that first meeting or that first inspection that I happen to be going to. And it's always somewhere different every day. My days and weeks are all over the place, probably fair to say.
And on a sort of similar question, how does your juggle work? How did Derwent support you with that?
It's not too dissimilar to Andrew's day, to be honest. My husband, Jack, is also in the real estate world. So, we're both in central London. We try to be as much as we can during the week. So it's definitely kind of a tag teaming situation when you get, the calls that someone's poorly or you need to venture home. We totally share that, which is great, really. It's enabled me to get back into my rhythm at work. I love what I do, but without that flexibility from Jack's company as well, I don't think it would, necessarily be as easy. But one thing I've found coming back to Derwent is I'm really fortunate that I have amazing role models, female role models at work who are nailing work, they're achieving, they're in leadership roles. But, ultimately they're great mums as well. And that's ultimately their main job, is being a mum, first of all. But it's so nice being able to see people succeed and what you can aspire to be as well. It makes you think, actually, yes, it is all possible. But like Andrew said, it's just trying to find that juggle, which initially is a little bit overwhelming and you don't know what's right or wrong. But then once you kind of sort that out, you get into a bit more of a rhythm, I would say.
Andrew, to you, being a business co-founder, and when it comes to leaving work, you get that call saying, actually, your child's sick and you need to leave. Do you think you're looked upon differently when it comes to leaving work to care for your children? And I guess also, as a male compared to a female, I can't tell you, quite a few dads have told me when I've been interviewing them over the past few weeks, especially actually, that if they get from the nursery and they need to ask their boss to leave to go pick up their child, I've heard someone say, they said, why can't your wife do that, for example? And it seems to automatically, from some senior bosses in the industry, fall on automatically on the women. How do you think it's looked on in your business, and how have you found it as a male?
It's funny, I'll kind of take that in 2 parts. One is my previous life when I worked for one of those big firms, 2 of those big firms, if you like. Self-admittedly, I probably was that guy. I never stooped as low as saying, can't your wife do that? So hopefully that's a positive. I just didn't understand the pressures. If I was deep in a meeting with someone or, doing a piece of work with someone and all of a sudden they had to get up to leave, I was probably rolling my eyes a little bit. If someone was arriving into work at, God forbid, 9:30 because they had dropped their kids off at nursery or play school or whatever it is, probably was that guy. So, I'm happy to put my hand in the air and say, upon having kids and looking back, I realized that was just so wrong and just so kind of team-like of me. The joy of being a business owner now is that I can sort of shape that and support those around me who I know have a difficult life, juggle. And we have plenty of those. We have plenty of those on our staff, and we have plenty of those who I am a partner with. And there's someone in particular in here whose wife is a teacher. She can't really drop off very often. That's really difficult as a teacher to drop and get to school in time for her classes. My colleague does the vast majority of dropping and a lot of picking for that matter. So he is often logging on at night and he's online at crazy times, but he's a really reliable hand. I know he's doing his job. I know he's doing it really well. And for that reason, nobody questions him. When he has to go, he has to go. And that's just fact. And so that's the way we like to look at it. We're a business of 22 people. I'm really proud to say that we're not clock watchers. Let's say flexibility runs from the top to the bottom. If you are a young mother or father in this business and you have to go, and that's it. And I think we all recognize that now. Well, hopefully we all recognize it now. I certainly do, having had the kids.
I think it's really important that actually, I think when I was in my early 20s as well and was working in a large company as a woman as well, I didn't understand and not necessarily got told that that was happening, but was made to believe that, mothers were leaving early and going to have a great time and we'd be going back playing with their kids and like running in late. Oh, they're late again. And actually, no, they've had a marathon before work, got the kids there, running across London, trying to get tubes and trains and still doing an amazing job at work and managing and juggling it all. And I think it is just changing the perception at a more junior level, but it was never sort of spoken about. And I think now young mothers and fathers are more vocal about it. So the future generation understand more and not thinking how we used to think when we were graduates and going up through the ranks.
I mean, I've got to say, it's like working alongside Claire, who's obviously got 2 young kids. I've learned so much about, the difficulties and the balance of getting no sleep and being straight in for a 9 o'clock meeting or Claire having to shoot off to the nursery pickup or whatever it might be. So I think for me, as someone who's not been used to it, I've learned so much about that balance and, how you're up late working emails or replying to emails, etc.
The Real Juggle campaign with Madison Berkeley.
Do you think that real estate companies in general look at parenting responsibilities differently according to gender? I guess I'm not talking specifically about any other businesses, but just real estate in general.
It's an interesting one. I think it's come a long way. And actually, since COVID, I think there has been a bigger shift in how businesses, perceive different roles and who's doing what. I'd like to think that is a thing of the past, and hopefully, this new generation coming through it's a real consideration for all of us now. So I think actually businesses do really need to just adapt and kind of work with it. For me, I think there is change in the industry. I think there's still an element of not luck, but it's still varying, who you work for, what the flexibilities are. Ultimately, I suppose the culture of the business is where it all stems from. So I do think there's change, and I think it's all positive. I just think we need to kind of continue on that trajectory. But I do feel it is a more even split now between males and females. I don't think there is that stigma, or I personally don't experience it here, essentially.
And I guess a big topic is, I think, maybe making senior bosses more aware of childcare costs as well. I don't think they quite understand how much it costs to have 1, let alone 2, 3 children in nursery. And I've heard other stories of other senior bosses saying, oh, my wife's going back to work now, so I now need to be doing pick up and drop off and share equally with her. And And a response has been, well, if your wife's gone back to work, surely you can afford someone to do that for you. How can we sort of change that? And do you think that that's also a slight issue within the old school real estate industry?
For me, the cost element, it's slightly painful for all of us, and everyone talks about it, but until you're faced with that realization of actually, maybe does it stack up for me to go back to work? What is the best thing long term financially for my family? But then you're also weighing up your own personal goals and your career and what you want to achieve. There is a balance. There are schemes, there are things that the government are doing, but they also come with restrictions. They're not that straightforward. It's just an awareness. I do think the senior directors, leadership teams, I do believe that message is coming through. Everyone is talking about it more and more. As long as you're listened to, as long as everyone's aware of what you're trying to make work and the struggles you're kind of going through, I think that's the first stepping stone. And hopefully, Andrew and I were talking about it before about school, hopefully this is like a finite period of time. It's not going to be too crazy forever. I'm sure that we're kind of going through one phase at a time. I'm sure that once we enter the school world, we'll then be unleashed with a whole new area of childcare we haven't even thought about yet. But we're kind of leaving that one for a couple of years until we have to think about it.
I was going to say, I only have to wait until September until Jack goes to school, which with one hand is good with respect to those costs. But then, as Lorna says, a whole other raft of complexities to think about in the working week. I have to say, I think the cost of childcare is just fundamentally wrong. It is just too expensive. And I'm fairly happy to say that, we pay between £3,000 and £4,000 per month for those 4 days of childcare. Now, that's obviously 2 kids in for 4 days. And to me, that is insanity. That is just far too much money for what we get. I mean, Jack and Layla are at a wonderful nursery and we love it. But surely that should not be that much money. And the other thing that frustrates me about that is that when you book a holiday and you want to go away, and you might have that holiday booked months in advance, so you can let your nursery know that you won't be there between the following dates. That's fine, pay the money. Or a child is unwell and they're not going to be in, no problem, pay the money. There's no relaxing of those fees dependent on how much the child or children are in nursery, which I think should also be reflected in costs. I do understand that they have to pay for staffing, heating, lighting of a building and all that kind of thing, but they don't have to pay for food if a child isn't there, and there are other savings if there's absenteeism. So
It's so frustrating, and salaries just aren't rising at the same rate as the yearly childcare cost increase. It's just not sustainable, because if the fees are still going to keep going up, salaries again aren't increasing, especially at the moment, or at that rate. That just is going to mean that more and more people are leaving the industry because they can't afford it. And again, have people in tears on the phone to me, especially, obviously it's been a tough year with bonuses and things, and actually, I know of women who haven't even been breaking even, but they want to keep their foot in the industry. They really want to focus on their career. They think obviously it's just a phase, and if they do leave the industry, they feel like their careers will go back. So it's just something that they have to suffer in order to keep themselves on the career ladder, and it's really sad to see. And we need to ensure that we are keeping those people, skilled, wonderful people in the industry. But it's been really interesting to get your opinions and comments on the issues raised today, and we thank you so much for being a part of it. And I don't think we're going to find the answer today. We do need to be vocal about these things, make everyone aware, and hopefully through time there will be changes.
Thanks so much for being honest and giving us a real insight into the day-to-day life of young parents in the real estate market.
The Real Juggle campaign with Madison Berkeley.